Welcome to Mindless Entertainment. My name is Jesse Milestone, your God Empress and fearless leader of the Mindless Mob. And before anyone asks, yes, there is a cat riding an orca on the wall behind me. But moving on, this video, as aggressive and angry and full of feelings as it might sound, really is intended to educate, not offend or upset anybody. Unless you're one very specific person, type of person. That's the person that's running around crying about this particular Super Bowl game we're going to talk about. We're talking about the refereeing in this game, the flags, certain flags that happen to be called right at the end of the game. After a very flagless game for the rest of it. And what everyone is what the one thing that certain people and Rams fans keep latching onto is, yeah, but there was the pass interference, the blatant face mask. They didn't call on Higgins earlier in the game. The blatant face mask, and that's proof that this is fair. That the refs weren't cheating, and this is fair. You're a fucking moron if you think that. I'm sorry, you're just a fucking idiot, and I don't have time for you. You're a moron. And maybe if your skin is thick enough to hang out to the end of the video, you'll understand why that perspective is abjectly fucking wrong. So, for those of you who are a little unclear as to what we're speaking about, I'll give you a little backstory. So, Super Bowl 56 just wrapped up this past Sunday with the Rams defeating the Bengals in what was, for all intents and purposes, a very fun, very exciting game. A handful of choice epic offensive moments, a lot of great defensive stands, just a good game all in all. A lot of, momentum going back and forth, et cetera, et cetera. It was a solid Super Bowl. So until the last couple of minutes. Because up until this point, the referees had seemed to have this policy of just let him play. Not a lot of yellow on the field. Not a lot of flags being thrown. For the last 2 minutes, in a critical moment, when the Rams, they're 8 yards from the goal, third down, and they throw the ball, incomplete. Now this right here should be 4th and 8. Hold on to your seats, boys and girls. Last shot at the end zone. And if the Bengals can just hold on for one more try, can just pull out one more great defensive stop, they'll win their first Super Bowl ever. Or if the Rams can pull it out in the nth hour, 4th and 8, on their absolute last chance to catch up in time to win this game, they can have the touchdown and put the Bengals in a tight spot, making it almost impossible for them to come back and sealing the Rams as the Super Bowl champions. Exciting stuff, guys, right? This is what it's all about. This is what football comes down to. The biggest game, the last game of the season, down to this critical moment, and you have the perfect setup for this. Again, that ball is batted down at third and goal, 8 yards from the line. Ball's down in the end zone. Okay, we're heading into this beautiful 4th and 8 moment. Oh my God, hearts are pounding. And then a flag is thrown. And a hold is called. And they review the footage, and the commentators themselves are scratching their heads as to why such a soft hold was called in this critical moment. After we can look at play after play, such as the Higgins face mask, that weren't called, that weren't flagged during the entire rest of the game. But this, for some reason, is so egregious that we have to alter the entire momentum of the game. We have to give the Rams a fresh set of downs, move them even closer to the line, and then line up all another, but don't even get me started on how many flags flew after that, to just make sure they had infinite chances right on the goal line, right on the line, to score a touchdown, therefore essentially sealing the fate of the game. So, again, you have the Higgins excuse. But they didn't call that face mask, so obviously this is fair. Clearly, that was the only egregiously missed penalty earlier in the game that benefited the Bengals, and so when it comes back right at the nth hour, at the most critical moment of the Basel of the game, it's totally fair. It's a 1-1, the end. You're an idiot. Once again, if that's your opinion, that is wrong. I'm here to explain to you why. Why do I get to explain to you why? Because I'm fucking here doing it, first of all. But why should you take my word for this over somebody else's? I am a referee. I referee the sport of fencing. I've been doing this for over a decade now. And in sports, nothing moves faster than the tip of a fencing weapon except for a bullet. Not a football, not a running back, not a wide receiver, a fucking fencing saber or a bullet. That's it. Those are the two fastest things in sports. There you go. And I noticed this. I noticed after a decade, because it's the thing with refereeing, right? When you start refereeing fencing, because of the speed at which this is happening, you can't actually see everything right away. You actually have to train your eyes to see. You have to train your brain to process things that are happening at this speed and understand what's coming together. And I noticed over the years, as I honed my skills and became a higher and higher level referee, and when I would watch football, even just from the comfort of my couch, even not even on an HD broadcast sometimes, I would catch things that the referees seemingly couldn't, or before they had the chance to. I would notice when a player was inbounds or out of bounds, or for sure had crossed the pylon or not, and made the call instinctively, intuitively, instantaneously, before the referees did. Does that mean anything? Not necessarily, although they always tell you, oh, when you see something on TV that you don't like, that's always the excuse. When you see something on TV that you don't like, remember, you don't have all the angles, you don't have the best view, you don't have all the knowledge. Okay, so how come then, if I can see it, by that logic then, if I can see it cleanly and clearly, then these referees, these trained, talented referees with the best views and the best angles should be able to see it. So that's when I started thinking to myself, something is not right here. And I started watching refereeing. I started watching the way that, paying closer attention to the way that football games were refereed. Then I noticed the utter lack of consistency when it came to certain, but not all referees. You have something that happens when you watch a football game where some games, sometimes you'll sit down and watch, like the Super Bowl up until the last couple of minutes, where nothing, literally no flag was thrown after the snap, before the whistle, up until that moment. You had 3 other flags. 2 were pre-snap. One was a delay of game, one was an offsides, and then you had one in the Bengals for the player on the field running on the field without his uniform on. All of these were things you really can't ignore. They're just right there by the book. They happen, and again, before the snap, after the whistle, so they're not affecting really the flow of the gameplay. But look at the Higgins face mask, sure. Look at the other hold when a Rams player actively pulls down the Bengal he's defending by the jersey well outside the 5 yards of scrimmage. And there was no flag for that one either. As they've pulled up the footage now, you can go and point to either side. Holds, pass interference, illegal contact that was not called the entire game because the referees had clearly made a decision. We're going to let them play. Other games, and this happened for a couple of seasons, people got very grumpy about it and they started dialing back. Other games, they've been very overly officious. They've decided to try to catch every single infraction and throw the yellow down any single time they could spot a potential hold, a potential this, a potential that. Some refereeing crews still approach it that way. Other refereeing crews throw really interesting flags, throw them at really interesting moments. Some of them will throw them only for the most egregious penalties, only the less egregious penalties. Some will only throw flags against one team when the penalties don't matter, and only throw it against the other team when it's going to actively screw them, to the point where, like, yeah, there are games when you can watch and you can predict. You can go, there's going to be a flag on this play. Lo and behold, I haven't been wrong once. I digress, though. So I started to notice these patterns. I started to think about how this relates to refereeing, right? In fencing, that is something we are taught. That's something every referee should be taught to understand, right? We are a critical part, an integral part of the game. We are there to ensure that the gameplay progresses fairly. We are not there to insert our will or opinions anywhere into that process. Our bias should not play a role in how we referee. And in fact, if it does, if we are in any way allowing our subjectivity to come into the way we officiate a game, or allow our own ideas of how it should or shouldn't go enter into the way we officiate a game, we then are not upholding our one core tenet, which is to ensure the fair play of the game. So in fencing, like I said, you can't necessarily see actions. So when two fencers come together in the middle, you can call simultaneous, which means there's no touch. No touch is awarded. And a weaker referee will call this more and more often because they can't see the intricate tempos that give one fencer the edge in that moment. Even some higher level referees sometimes will struggle with this in a particular bout. And if that happens, they may call more simultaneouses than they're used to. The thing you're not supposed to do is guess. Or call it sometimes, but not others when you happen to see it or happen to not, or hope to not. Because then you run the risk of penalizing one side unfairly, only seeing when one fencer does it or not when the others. Or what's worse, setting a precedent, for example, where you don't call it for half of a bout. So the one fencer learns that they don't have to do certain things to get a touch. They can fence a certain way for the rest of the bout, and then all of a sudden, the way you referee changes, and the way they have to fence changes. That's what happens in a game like football. It's the same thing. When you play 3/4 of football, 3 and almost 4/4 of football, where the referees have essentially informed you they're going to let you play. They're going to let you hit each other, knock each other around, grab onto each other's uniforms all over the place, and they're not going to penalize you for it. Then after those 3/4 have passed, you get very comfortable playing a certain way, both the Bengals and the Rams. And so it's completely, wildly unjust for the referees, after setting this precedence for 58 minutes of gameplay, to suddenly, abruptly, out of nowhere, at the most critical moment of the game, change how they do it. That's again in fencing. If you're a referee that calls no touch, no touch, no touch, all of a sudden 14-14, the game-winning touch, all of a sudden at the tightest possible moment, attack. And you just give it away because, in that moment you panicked, you freaked out, and you thought maybe that guy was a little bit ahead. That doesn't feel good for anybody. It shouldn't feel good if you're a Rams fan. You should not have been denied that 4th and 8th game-winning touchdown opportunity. The same way the Bengals fans shouldn't have been denied a clean loss or victory if it hadn't gone that way. That's football. That's the excitement of the game. If we want to watch predetermined outcomes, there's pro wrestling for that. But that's not supposed to be the way it goes on the biggest stage of the NFL. That's why it's wrong, because the referees in their position use their authority to let both teams know unequivocally for 58 minutes, this is how you can play the game. This is how we are allowing you to play the game. This is how we will penalize or not the game. We will literally not throw any flags after the snap. Just play. Just play the game. Short of flagrant, unsportsmanlike conduct actions, just play the game. And then when the players all got used to it, all got comfortable, all felt good about doing that, at the most critical moment, the ref said, "Ha! Just kidding. Just kidding. Fuck you, Bengals. Rams are going to win this one." Who the fuck said they get to make that decision? And it's just the stupidity of fans who want to buy into the us, them, who'll buy into the first narrative, the Higgins fans, and then you're just bitter, you're just this, you're just that. It's only that willingness to be led by the narrative that stops us from looking at the NFL and going, stop fucking around. We stand for our teams. We live and die by our teams. Like, that's a thing. I mean, football fandom is deep, but it's not just fanatical and bullshit and stupid. It's meaningful. It gives a city like Cincinnati something to believe in when they ain't feeling so great about themselves. It bonds a city like Philadelphia together, a David against Goliath. It builds narratives and stories of inspiration and hope. And when some asshole in stripes decides that he's more important than all of those stories and narratives and the actual results of people's hard work, it gets ruined for all of us. So please stop pointing at each other and saying, you're just bitter, you're just stupid, you're just that. Point at the referees. Point at the people who, I know it's a cliche to blame the refs. I'm a referee who has taken more shit than you could possibly imagine. Standing here saying, please, in this instance, blame the fucking referees. It is their fault. Just because we live under this today, don't blame the referees, don't blame them. When the referees cheat, when the referees fail us, when the referees show their incompetence or their bias, absolutely blame the referees. Because if we don't, how do we stop them from doing it again? Ask yourselves that. That's all I got for you today. So guys, make sure you're following me over at m.e.godempress on 17 Live, where I'm doing most of my streaming, putting most of my content. Make sure you join the awesome Mindless Mob Discord server. We're having a lot of fun over there. And guys, till next time, as the French would say, no goblin, and God Empress out.